The BYU Cougars are looking for redemption against the Arizona State Sun Devils when they square off in Tempe. What is it going to take for BYU to keep their Big 12 title hopes alive, and more importantly, the college football playoff aspirations? We're digging into that, and I really think it comes down to, can BYU find a way to rediscover their scoring punch?
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first view and or listen of the day. And as always, thank you to all of you who are everydayers with us right here on your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. You can get a big return with our friends at FanDuel right now. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet hits. It's as simple as that. Go to FanDuel.com to get started today. All right, let's dive right in. BYU, the Cougars looking to get some redemption after a very disappointing outcome against Kansas a week ago as they head out on the road to Tempe to take on the Arizona State Sun Devils. This game is the hottest ticket in all of college football. I was told yesterday when I was doing radio with the KSL Sports Zone that the get-in price, that we're talking like nosebleed seats down there in Tempe, $350. And I'm assuming that number probably climbs today before going down ahead of kickoff tomorrow, speaking of Friday and Saturday. But the bigger point to be made is this is a big game. And consider where these two programs, speaking of ASU and BYU, were just 2 months ago. Who would have thought that maybe the biggest single game in the Big 12 to date is Arizona State, who was picked 16th out of 16 teams in the Big 12 preseason poll, and the BYU Cougars, who are 13th in said poll. It's absolutely incredible to see what these two programs have accomplished this season, and now they go head-to-head for essentially all the marbles. Let's just make it simple. Whichever team wins this game is probably going to Arlington, Texas to play in the Big 12 championship game, likely against Colorado. If you win that big game in the Big 12 championship game down there in Arlington, you're going to play in the college football playoff. That there is no kind of wiggle room around that. There are some crazy scenarios that could see the losing team still find their way to Arlington. More importantly, I guess on the BYU side of it, but that means it's out of your control. Everything BYU has fought for, worked for, everything they've aspired to have this season comes down to this game. If BYU loses this game, they may be the most disappointing 9-2 team in all of college football. I don't think that's hyperbole. I really don't, because consider BYU is 9-0, ranked 6th in the country. There are people out there saying that BYU can drop a game here or there down the stretch and still find themselves as an at-large team in the college football playoff field. Well, the College Football Playoff Committee essentially ripped that away from BYU by dropping them like a stone from number 6 to number 14 after managing just 13 points against Kansas last week in a 17-13 ball game. It was a pretty punitive thing that the big playoff committee did, but BYU still controls their fate. If they go out there and win this game, they are still in line to go play in Arlington, and essentially BYU would all but have locked up a spot. Considering they would have to still beat Houston, we understand that, but BYU would have a major leg up in punching their ticket, like a number of you have probably already bought tickets to go to Arlington to AT&T Stadium to watch them compete for a Big 12 title. The other thing about this is that BYU, if they were 9-2, you go from dreams of playing for the playoff, having a chance at a national championship, Big 12 title, all that gone seemingly in an instant. It's incredible to consider that BYU, after 16 minutes of football tomorrow, could be looking at a ceiling of the Alamo Bowl. And I know the Alamo Bowl is considered to be a pretty decent bowl game by all standards, but in this era of the expanded college football playoff, it's just not good enough, especially considering how BYU started this season. So, in channeling the spirit of Al Davis, what has BYU's whole focus got to be? All it's got to be is this: just win, baby. That's all you got to focus on here. Now, there are question marks about how BYU is going to attack this game. Number one, how do you slow down Scatabuya, as DJ and PK and myself like to call Cameron Scatabu, who's an absolutely phenomenal running back. And for my money, maybe the most exciting and also underrated back in the Big 12 Conference. He is absolute dynamite on the football field. BYU's defense has been very, very solid, if not spectacular, against opposing running backs this year. They got to do it again in this game against maybe the hardest-headed, most physical, violent runner they have faced today. And they faced some really good ones. But Cameron Scatabu is going to make life very difficult for BYU's defense. I have faith that Jay Hill, if they can replicate what they did against Kansas a week ago, BYU is going to have a fighting chance once again. And frankly, BYU's defensive effort last week was very capable of a winning effort. They should have won that football game. You hold a lot of college football teams to 17 points, you're going to win more often than you're not. BYU's offense, they take the bulk of the blame last week. So what does BYU's offense have to do this week to get back in the good graces of Cougar fans and get Aaron Roderick seemingly off a hot seat that he seems to be on every time there seems to be a faltering with BYU's offense? Well, you got to succeed in the red zone. You can rep, you can practice, you can have all the planning sessions you want in terms of trying to find ways to score in the red zone. But when they're out there on the field in Tempe tomorrow, how are they going to go about things? Are they going to crack under the immense pressure? Are they going to falter like they did last week at home in front of their home faithful? If they do, they deserve to lose this football game. It's as simple as that in my mind. If you cannot score touchdowns in the red zone, you do not deserve to be a college football playoff team. That's also not hyperbole. But conversely, if you can go out there and show that you learned your lesson from a week ago, you talked about the fact you had a very poor week of practice leading up to Kansas. I think that kicked them in the proverbial rear end this week to get their you-know-what in order and get themselves back to playing the level they were playing at before that. If that is true, if they have absolutely accomplished that and they start scoring touchdowns in the red zone, they're going to have every opportunity to pull off this win and keep their dreams of the Big 12 title and, more importantly, the college football playoff aspirations they harbor alive. It doesn't come down to much, folks. This is a big, big game, no doubt about it. Jake Retzlaff's got to take care of the football. For heaven's sakes, give LJ Martin the ball more than he's getting it. I don't think he's 100% healthy. I'll be very honest about that. He's got a shoulder harness on one arm. He seems to be a step slow than what he was a year ago, and I think that's probably a holdover from what I understand was a high ankle sprain earlier this year, because those high ankle sprains linger, and they hurt. Anybody who's had a high ankle sprain, you know how brutal they can be. I don't think LJ's 100% healthy, but the stats say you give him 15, 20 carries, he gets over 80 plus yards in a game. BYU essentially is undefeated when you do that. The fact that he had 0 carries inside the 10-yard line last week is just criminal. It's absolutely incredible to think that they did not give LJ Martin, who I believe is far and away BYU's best running back, the ball in those scenarios. Get him the ball and let him lead you to glory. Jake, don't turn the ball over. Don't put the BYU Cougars in a bad spot with a bad interception in a very difficult spot. You got to avoid those back-breaking plays. If BYU's defense does what it did a week ago, I think it has all the makings of being able to hold Arizona State down here, because, quite frankly, if you look at Arizona State's stats, they essentially have got a 4-headed monster on their offense. And if you can slow it down, you have a chance to win. Obviously, Sam Levitt at quarterback, he's going to be supremely motivated considering his dad and brother both played for BYU. Cam Scatabu's over 1,000 yards on the season already. And then you also have to worry about, I think, their top 2 receiving options in Jordan Tyson and is it Kamen Matire? I think is how you say his name. It might be Chaman. But if you can slow those 4 down, and I say slow down because I don't think you're going to shut them down. You slow them down, essentially force other players to have to step up and be the difference makers. And if they prove to be the difference makers, you tip your cap to them. But I would put this and tell BYU's defense, if I were the defensive coordinator, shut those guys down. And if we do that, we have faith that the offense is going to come through. Obviously, anything that the defense can offer scoring-wise, extra turnovers, special teams coming through with a big play here or there, any of that is just added gravy on top of it. But this game comes down to, can BYU rediscover their scoring touch in the red zone? If they do, they will have every opportunity to pull off this win. This game, to me, feels like it's 50-50 right down the middle right now. There are advantage on both sides of this game. And I cannot wait to watch it, take it all in, and break it all down. But it is going to be an exciting game. But once again, there is a ceiling on both sides of this. BYU wins, the ceiling remains. You could play for all the marbles in college football and have a chance to play at the college football playoff. You lose this game, you're going to San Antonio New Year's weekend. That feels like the two different ceilings that exist in this. So once again, Al Davis just comes to mind. Just win, baby. Just win. All right, coming up next, we're going to talk with two guys who I think their position groups are going to be absolutely critical in the outcome of this game, and they're in the trenches. Sione Po'uha coaches BYU's defensive tackles. He will join the show coming up next. A little later on, you're going to hear from TJ Woods, BYU's offensive line coach. Both of them have done an incredible job with BYU's trench play this year, considering how poor it was a season ago. What's went into that? We'll get into that next, right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. Now, Prize Picks is here for you guys when it comes to your daily fantasy sports needs. And the best part about Prize Picks is they are the best, simply put, the best out there when it comes to daily fantasy sports. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Well, what are the picks? It's over under. It's as simple as that. You find a player, you think they're going to over under the number that Prize Picks offers to you guys. And if you hit it, you can win up to 100 times your money. The best part is they also have the best place to get real money sports action. Just join over 10 million users and sign up today and have fun along the way. They've invented Flex Play, which means you can still cash out even if your lineup is perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Think about that. You can still win without a perfect lineup. And the best part is they put their members first. So all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When your picks hit, you can get your money as quick as 15 minutes. So take advantage today, my friends, and get $50 instantly when you play $5 on your first lineup. You don't need to win that to get your $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. So take advantage of it today. They also offer weekly promotions that can also increase your winnings as well. So all you got to do now is go download the app today, use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege, and get that $50 instantly after using the promo code LOCKEDONCollege and that first $5 lineup. Once again, download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege. You get that $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. And it's all courtesy of our friends over at Prize Picks, as they like to say, where you can run your game. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first view and or listen of the day. Hope you guys are having a fantastic day whenever you're here and or watch this. BYU's got a major task on their hands, trying to slow down Cam Scattaboo in this game. DJ and PK, who I work with on the KSL Sports Zone, have started calling him Cameron Scattabooya, and I think it's an incredible nickname because that kid, absolute dynamite. I think he is one of the more underrated, as crazy as it sounds to say that, running backs in all of college football. He is absolutely awesome, and he is going to be absolutely intent on making life miserable for BYU's defense. That's where guys like John Nelson, Blake Mangelson, Josh Singh, all these defensive tackles BYU has seen success with this year, they've got to come up bigger than ever in this and make sure that the interior of BYU's defensive line is as stout as possible. And then also, when you get into those passing downs, make Sam Levitt's life miserable. Well, what goes into that? Well, I decided to ask a guy who knows better than most, because any of you who know Sione Po'uha's background know that this is a guy who has played football at the highest level. He was a star at the University of Utah, played I don't know how many years in the NFL. He has done everything that the players that are playing for him hope to accomplish in their respective playing careers. So it's good to learn from a guy who's been there, done that. And he tried to explain to me what it's going to take for BYU to have success, and more importantly, how he has had success so far this year with BYU's defensive tackles.
How do you feel about your defensive tackles overall?
Man, they've done a great job. First and foremost, done a great job of just buying in and really just leaning into the culture of the defense, culture of the defensive line. These guys have given their all, not only in just saying yes verbally, but you see them show up, you see them work hard, you see them gain the weight that they need to gain. As you see, Blake Mangelson was a guy I attributed from the, I got from the outsides, right? He was a DN, and I think I got him the last week of spring, and just his willingness to communicate, coach, what I need to do. He came in during the summers, was able to do individual stuff, but then gaining weight. So just the buy-in process of them, and this really just is an outcome of how hard those guys have worked and how much they've bought in.
Now, we were talking with Coach Hill just a minute ago, and he talked about the buy-in factor as well with the defense as a whole. He talked about the strength and conditioning, and you're working with guys who are defensive tackles who might be a little lighter than you might prefer, because you'd rather
Yeah.
have like a 330-pound guy
Yeah.
probably in the middle there. But what's made John Nelson in particular so effective in the middle there?
The technique, right?
Okay.
Is a lot of times, and you have the strength and the power and the technique, and they all got to correspond together. Now, if you're a little bit lacking on one end, whether you're a little bit lighter, right, you're going to have to depend on your technique. A lot of times, I was a bigger guy when I was playing, right? So I depended a lot on my brute strength and stuff like that. Could have been sharper on my technique-wise, but you lean on the certain parts that you might be lacking in with the parts that you're strong in.
Now, Blake, you already mentioned him. He seems to have been very effective in his role. Is he more on that technique side as well? Because he's a little bit lighter as well.
Yeah, and he had natural hands, natural technique.
Okay.
One of the things as a player, I remember some of the hardest centers that I had to go against were wrestlers. And so Blake's a wrestler.
Yeah.
So he understands leverages and bases, and really playing defensive line is understanding where your leverages are, how your base plays into it, and then how you can, counter and lever different angles. So Blake had a natural understanding of that, and so once he understood that, he was able to catch on. Now, one thing with playing inside, everything just happens quicker.
Sure.
Right? Everything happens right now, and there's really no room for mistakes. So he was, I think that's the only difference that he would probably say is that, it just happens right now rather than.
And I've talked with guys who played offensive tackle, who moved into offensive guard, and they talk about all of a sudden you're going from playing in space to playing in a phone book.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing for your defensive tackles, I would imagine. Your guy's on you, or you're on your guy immediately.
Yeah, absolutely. And so by the time you make contact, like your hands have to be in the right position, your head has to be on the right side, your base has to be in the right position for you to capitalize on the strength. So everything has to be mechanically in place within that first strike. Some people think we just go in there and just bang heads and all that stuff. That's what it looks like, right?
Sure.
But it's really controlled. It's really technical, and so to have those guys do that, it's really fun to watch.
Now, tough loss against Kansas, obviously, but the defense as a whole performed very well. Held Kansas to less than half what they typically rush for. So is it like, how do you feel coming out of that game with the loss, but also understanding your defense performed very, very well?
Yeah, you always want to leave, especially with a team, we've always tried to play our best selves, right? There were some plays that we didn't play our best selves, and so we're going to go and evaluate that, and that's what we bring to the table, right? That's our contribution to the whole BYU team, and the offense depends on us, and we depend on them as well, right? And they've done a lot of great things. There were some opportunities out there that we left out there that we felt could have made us better or even made a difference, and so those are things that we turn around and we look at and we work at so we can improve for the next game.
Big game this week, obviously, Arizona State. Both of you guys are ranked, and winner, in theory, has the inside track to a Big 12 title game. I'm not asking about that, but I'm talking more about the matchup this week. What's the mentality for this team coming off that loss?
Yeah, every single week it can get a little tricky because every team has a scenario, right? And every team has, whether it be SMU or whether it be Utah, now Arizona State. There's always a backstory to it, and there's always a weight. And something we always talk about in our room is that every game has a certain type of characteristics that'll try to pull you away from your culture, right? And have you play really either too high or too low, or play into something else that might not be there. Every single week for us is really just double down on your culture, double down on the basics, double down on what's important and what your core values are, and that's what you put on the field, right? You're not chasing situations or scenarios or anything like that. It can get tempting to be able to do that, but it's really just sticking to your core and doubling down on your culture and your core values.
Now, one of those core things of this program is love and learn. And
yes,
I had somebody tell me after the game, this next week after the loss is going to be more about learning, maybe more than loving it in a way. Would you agree with that assessment?
Well, you got to learn you got to love to learn, right?
Sure.
It got to be something where you and loving is not in a sense. We always think about it as something that's soft and all that stuff. Well, love is pretty hard, right? We do a lot of things that because we love people, right? I mean, I don't really get up I'm not a 5:30, 4 o'clock in the morning type of person, right? But I love the people I work with. I love my job. I love my family, and that drives us, right? So there's a special type of power to that. So loving to learn, loving each other through learning what we could do and what we could do better, and through our mistakes. So that's the part of the culture that you always got to implement, and it's not just one face of it, right? It's very 3D, if that makes sense, right? There's texture to that word love, and so now we got to find out this angle. So how do you love when you win? Okay, we know what that feels like. How do you love when you lose, right? And learn and build.
Now, Cam Scadaboo, you guys have faced a lot of good running backs this year, but he's just the latest in this long line. What do you expect for your guys facing off against a guy like that?
Man, just a tough runner, right?
Yeah.
Just if I were to describe one word, tough, right? He's a guy that he runs with his heart, he runs with his soul. I love his toughness, I love his character, all about it. I think I can really relate. I draw to that, right? Okay. And so I love watching him play. I love watching his the big playmaking abilities, his grit, and so that's what we're going to be facing coming up. And so we got to make sure we stay sound, our core values, right? Stay true to our culture, and play with sound fundamentals and technique, and play as a team.
Now I know you coached against ASU when you were up at Utah. Program-wise, Kenny Dillingham's done a really incredible job just looking at it on its head, but what do you expect from ASU as a whole?
Man, yeah, I mean, what I've seen on film, just really, that's a tough team, right? Scadaboo is tough because his O-line's tough, right? Yeah. His O-line's tough because their coordinator's tough, and their O-line coach is tough, and so the characteristics, they bleed down to the players, and so they do a really good job at who they are characterized, and then they execute their plays, right? That's why they play so good, and how he can run so hard, and so you love that characteristic, especially in football, right? You need that characteristic of just toughness and grittiness, and you see that on film.
There you go. BYU defensive tackles coach Sione Po'uha. Thank you to him for taking the time to join us here on the podcast. I could talk to that dude for hours. He has got a really, really keen mind when it comes to football, but more about life in general. You can kind of tell that he's really good about melding those two things. And I think Sione has been a really, really nice addition to BYU's staff, and he's done a really, really solid job. As he talked about, his defensive tackles, they're frankly undersized. And it's nothing against John Nelson or Blake Mangelson. They weigh 280 and 290 probably, respectively, on a good day, but they have more than accomplished what they have set out to accomplish so far this year. But biggest test to date, obviously coming up against Arizona State in this matchup in Tempe. All right. Flipping over to the offensive side of the football, what is it going to take for BYU's offensive line to step up? Obviously, you've lost Braden Keim to injury. You've had to shuffle the lineup multiple times. I'm speaking from the BYU perspective, moving guys like Bruce Mitchell and Austin Leusa in and out of the lineup. Connor Pay, our good friend here on the podcast, he's back in the lineup. Well, the guy who's kind of behind it all, TJ Woods, he's going to talk about what it's taken to get BYU's offensive line to where it's at today. We'll do that next, right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Now, FanDuel is here for you guys to help you have some fun when it comes to the NFL action all season long. You can take advantage of it with FanDuel, as they are America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. It's as simple as that. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything to place your live bets on the NFL all in one place. And if it's not just the NFL you're interested in, talk about this game with BYU and Arizona State tomorrow. You can take advantage of that today. So we get the hunch in the middle of a game. You can check out the latest stats. You live play-by-play and so much more on the same page where you're placing your bets. They keep you up to date so you're not missing anything and making a weird proposition when you may have missed something. That's what I love about FanDuel. So visit FanDuel today to join and get started with a $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet hits. It's as simple as that. That's FanDuel.com to get started today, and never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, as they are an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first view and or listen of the day. Another shameless plug to join the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. Get the inside scoop on all things I'm hearing about BYU sports sent to your phone in the form of a text message. You get a 14-day free trial to see if it's the right option for you guys. So if you're interested in joining today, click the link in the show notes below, whether you're watching this on YouTube or if you're catching it wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, the myriad of different podcast providers out there. It's a hyperlink. Click on it, sign up today, 14-day free trial, and just $5 a month afterwards. And the best part, it's not just inside intel. If you want to have one-on-one conversations with myself, you can do that via text message as well. So it doesn't get much better than that, and join us today. All right, BYU's offensive line is going to be critical. As I talked about, I want to see LJ Martin go off in this game and really lead BYU to glory. Well, he cannot do that without BYU's offensive line doing their thing. The metrics last week, as Connor Pay alluded to, indicated BYU moved the ball at will between the 20s against Kansas. Now you got to be able to finish in the red zone. And I know that Connor, he was adamant that BYU would get it right. He believed that they had practiced well and they would have the right mix of things. Well, I decided to go and ask the guy who was coaching up Connor and his teammate, TJ Woods, about all that. We had a great conversation about Isaiah Jatta, thoughts on Connor Pay, having to move guys like Bruce Mitchell in and out of the lineup, and how good it's been to have quality depth of that caliber for this BYU line after they dealt with the injuries they've dealt with this season. We got to a whole lot more than that, and we'll get to it right now with TJ Woods.
I had a conversation with Connor, and he told me that Isaiah Jatta is the thinking man's offensive lineman. Is that how you would describe him as well?
He is, yeah. I mean, I'd probably say that's been the biggest surprise for me is just, his football acumen is very high. He spends a lot of time in the film room. I think Connor's kind of connected with him that way because Connor is that way too. But yeah, Isaiah's been a real pleasant surprise in that area, and we're thankful we have him.
How much of an advantage is it for guys like that to have that acumen when it comes to playing O-line?
Well, I mean, it's everything. The defense is out there trying to fool two position groups, the O-line and the quarterback. And so, not getting fooled is a big part of being a good offensive lineman, right? Seeing the tricks, calling out the tricks before the magician can get you, if that makes sense. And I think quarterback's the same way with the back end. So you got to be a sharp dude to really attack and play this position the way it's supposed to be played, in my opinion.
Now, Caleb went through his struggles last year, and they were highly publicized. We all saw it on film, but he's talked about the fact that he feels like he's settled in now. What's led to him settling in as well as he has this season, in your opinion?
I think just his confidence level. I think, the consistency that he's kind of shown himself, I would bet, is part of the reason why that plays out the way it does. I think it's the consistency in the messaging, it's the consistency in the coaching and the teaching too. But that part's easy. It's him being able to go out there and do it consistently. And I think as he sees that, and he saw that in spring, he saw that in fall camp, and all that stuff builds on itself. Once you do that, then you feel good about it, and then you go out there and you let it rip. It's a little bit like if you get on a heater in golf. It's like, shoot, I could do whatever I want, man. This thing goes right in the middle of the fairway. That's all of us are out here doing the same. All these guys are out here doing the same thing, trying to gain the confidence mentally in their ability to utilize the techniques and execute what we're asking them to do. And when they do that, then they can play full speed and they can play to their full potential.
When a guy like Connor misses 6 weeks, how much, concern do you have as they come back that they'll be able to pick up where they left off?
Yeah, I don't know if I was concerned. I was a little cautious, I would say. And Connor's great. I mean, everything Connor does is A+. I mean, it's his communication, his process through all of that. There was a little bit early in the week, he's still rolling around on the cart, and we're going, is he going to be able to play on Saturday? But it was all part of the process. Obviously, our medical team did a great job with him, and he did a great job trusting in them, following the plan, and he did a heck of a job coming back in there. And I think you'll see, there was still some rust a little bit in that last game. I think he's continuing to knock some of that off, and look for him to do big things this week.
You've had to rotate a lot of guys through Bruce. We've seen Sonny. We've seen Austin. How nice is it to know you have this depth that can step in at any point?
Yeah, I think it's huge. And I think, this being in a Power 4 conference, it's a physical battle every week, right? And I think that's the biggest difference. Having coached at different levels, it's a big man's game, and there's big people, and there's 40-mile-an-hour car crashes every single play, and so things happen, right? And I think the difference between the good teams and the average teams usually in the leagues are the ability to have depth and to be able to play Bruce Mitchell and still have success, and be able to play Isaiah Jatta and still have success. So Austin Leusa in the same breath. Like, I think those are the things we're most proud about, is that we've had multiple guys be able to go in there and execute at a high level.
Coming into Arizona State, I mean, coming off that loss against Kansas, but what do you see from Arizona State on tape?
They're good. They're athletic. They fly around. They're aggressive. They play with an edge, which I appreciate. They're a dang good unit, and it's going to take our best effort to go into their place and come home with a win for sure.
They're one of those established programs. It's been a Power 5 program for decades at this point. Do you see that, like, what you're talking about, like, that they have the size on the interior that's going to give you guys a stiff challenge?
Yeah. I mean, I think that their inside guys are good. They're physical, but they're also athletic too. They can move around, which keeps you honest as an offensive lineman. Their DNs are good pass rushers. They can get up the field. They like I said, they got good players for sure.
You guys have gone to this full house backfield. How fun is it for your O-line to know that there's 3 different running backs that can go in any which direction at any point?
Yeah, it's a fun little package. When you have all those backs, it's about getting the best players on the field, and so it's been nice to be able to, now that we have all those guys back healthy, been able to utilize that. So that's been fun.
Now you carry the run game coordinator title. How much influence do you have on saying, hey, let's try this, let's try that?
Yeah, I have a fair share. I mean, it's a staff effort, right? We're all in there, in the lab, cooking up schemes in all areas, right? And I think we do a good job of that as a staff. Honestly, there's good chemistry, and there's a lot of trust within that room, and so there's no just one area that obviously we have our specialties and all that type of stuff, but there's definitely influence from a lot of guys in that room.
Okay, I got to ask you this question. Connor's told me that there's a trick play he's been advocating for Coach Roderick to run for him. Has he mentioned this to you at all?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. He's
self-promoter.
Yeah. He's smart enough to work the angle. You know what I mean? He gets it.
There you go. BYU offensive line coach TJ Woods. I love that dude. That mustache is absolutely regal, and you can tell that he has got like this quiet reserve of confidence in this unit. That's what I sense from him talking. And he obviously doesn't want to have his guys get all huffy puffy and get all out over their skis. They get a big head, as it were, going into this game. But BYU's offensive line has got to go out there and prove a point against this Arizona State defensive line. Their pass rush rate for Arizona State, not that great. If BYU can keep Jake Retzloff upright and give him adequate time, I think he can complete some passes downfield. But more importantly, I want to see BYU run the football well against Arizona State. They've had a good run of late. They had 250 plus yards against both Oklahoma State as well as UCF not that long ago. It's been a little tougher sledding the past 2 weeks, but the metrics are still there. The BYU's offensive line is back to more of what it was in 2020, 2021, 2022, instead of what we saw last year in 2023 when it was just absolute the pits. So keep that going and go out there. And if BYU can run for 150, 200 yards in this game, I think they give themselves every opportunity to pull off what I think would be a fairly comfortable win. But that's me saying that from my analyst chair here in my house in Saratoga Springs, Utah. So I'm looking forward to this game. Honestly, I think it's one of the more highly anticipated games in the Big 12 of the season, if not the most anticipated game of the season. And I think BYU is going to get the W. I think that they got really, really down on themselves and frankly upset with themselves about what happened last week against Kansas. They're embarrassed. They feel awful about how they let things slip against the Jayhawks. And yeah, some bad breaks, obviously. We have a quick kick go off the helmet of a guy who doesn't even know that ball's coming his way. Stuff like that happens. It's how you respond to it. And once again, you don't want to live with the regret of saying what could have been when BYU was 9-0 if they dropped to 9-2 in this game. I've got faith that BYU can get the job done, but I do think it's going to be a tight affair. I think this is a game where it ends up BYU 27, Arizona State 23. But I think BYU gets back into the win column and reignites their chase for Big 12 glory and, more importantly, the college football playoff, and keeps all that within their grasp. That's all you can ask for if you're a BYU fan at this juncture. And we'll see how it all goes down. We'll have a postcast edition of the podcast coming out as soon as I'm done with my radio responsibilities after the game. And as always, we'll have plenty of coverage, both in the lead up and into the aftermath of all of this. But as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first view and or listen of the day. I appreciate every single one of you who tune in. And thank you once again for being everydayers right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.